think for a lot of us, we treat joy too often like it's a reward, something we get to feel after the hard work is done. But what if waiting for joy till the end is not really what life is about? What if joy is the hard work? Welcome to Badass Softie, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and last week we talked about grief. And I've heard from so many of you who have been in the same spot I was in. And so thank you so much for reaching out and sharing your own stories with me about your process of working through grief and continuing to try to move forward in life, even in the midst of hard things. And I thought that, if we're going to talk about grief, that we also should probably talk about joy. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I love joy. I want people around me to have joy. I want to bring joy. I want to cultivate joy. I like to laugh. I like to find whimsy in all the things that I do. I find joy in just about everywhere I go. And in fact, this year we went to Disneyland as a family for the first time, and I wanted to bring something special home that was more than just, mouse ears or plushy toys. And so I was on the lookout for something fun, and we found a Disney artist who is actually drawing live. And you could commission them to do drawings like on the spot of different characters. And we looked around and there were so many to choose from, but it was actually my husband who chose two characters he thought that most represented us. And the one he chose for me was Joy from the Inside Out movies. And so, he chose anxiety from the newest one, and then he chose joy for me. And if you've seen those movies, you know how those two things work really well together. But that was the souvenir we brought back from Disneyland as a picture of us. And it felt so fun to have my husband say, when I see that character of Joy, I think of you. Now, in my life, I feel like there's been a lot of times professionally and in leadership where I feel like I've had to tamp down my joy because, even as a professor, learning is serious business in the classroom, right? Work can be serious business. How many times have you in a leadership or business setting said or heard the words like, all right, everybody, let's get back to work, right? Like you were laughing and joking around or there's some whimsy going on. And then it's like, okay, no. Now let's get back to the work. I think for a lot of us, we treat joy too often like it's a reward, that's something we get to feel after the hard work is done, which is true. When you accomplish something, I think there's a lot of joy. But what if waiting for joy till the end is not really what life is about? But what if joy is the hard work? Not the frosting at the end of the meal, but the meal itself. Now, what I'm talking about here is joy isn't the same as happiness, because happiness depends on circumstances like the weather, the wind, or like good news, but joy doesn't. Joy can show up in the middle of heartbreak or on the edge of exhaustion or right beside grief. Happiness reacts, joy chooses. Happiness is a feeling, joy is a posture. Happiness comes and goes, but joy endures because it's rooted in meaning, not mood. And so, really, joy isn't pretending that everything's fine and just being happy all the time. But it's about remembering that even in those darkest moments, light still gets in. That even when the story hurts, it's worth living. So I've been studying joy a little bit because I wanted to see how joy impacts leadership and work. And today you're going to get a little bit of professor mode from Dr. JJ. So I'm going to bring in some of the research around joy. And what I found is that in every culture studied by anthropologists, from the Himba of Namibia to the Sami of Scandinavia, rituals of joy are woven into everyday survival. There's dancing while working. There's dancing while harvesting. There's singing. There's humor and hardship. Joy wasn't a break from the labor, it was the labor. It was how people stayed human while working things out. And the craziest thing beyond that is it's not just a part of the work, but it's actually just plain good for you. Research from UCLA psychologist Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky shows that people who intentionally cultivate moments of joy are not avoiding pain, they're actually expanding their capacity to handle it. And neuroscientists at Harvard Center for Health and Happiness have shown that joy actually activates reward and resilience centers simultaneously in your brain. This means it doesn't just help us feel good, it helps us recover faster from stress and grief and uncertainty. There's even a cross-cultural study from the University of Michigan where researchers found that people who experienced regular moments of awe and joy, even small ones, had lower inflammation and stronger immune responses. Joy doesn't ignore what hurts, it helps the body remember how to heal. You see what I'm saying? Joy is incredible. And so really, there's some things I want to talk about when it comes to joy. There's some things that I've learned, especially in my research here lately, that have reshaped my perspectives on joy and what it means for my life. Much like what I talked about last week with grief, the things that I was learning, here are some things that I'm learning about joy. The first thing is joy is not frivolous, it's fuel. So in business relationships and leadership, joy, like I said, is often dismissed as indulgent, like we'll celebrate when we hit the target. But I think so often when it comes to work, we think that it just has to be serious, stop messing around, right? But neuroscience tells a different story. When you experience joy, your brain actually releases dopamine and serotonin, and these are chemicals that literally expand your ability to think creatively and solve problems. Joy allows you to think better and solve problems better, right? Harvard Business Review documents how joyful workplaces see higher productivity, fewer sick days, and greater innovation. At Yale, they found a study for emotional intelligence that when people who internally practice moments of joy during their workday through music or humor or gratitude or just connection with a coworker, they had a 31% increase in productivity and reported 55% lower stress levels. Joy doesn't come after success. Joy doesn't inhibit success. It fuels it. You know, I remember one time when we were launching one of the first courses at StoryBrand, and we opened up our cart online, and it was supposed to close at midnight. And we were offering this crazy deal where you could get a discount on the course, but also we were going to give everybody a free Apple TV with every purchase. And people could order online, but they could also call in. And there were a few of us on staff at the time, and none of us had kids. And so we all decided to stay late at the office together till the very end. But partway through the night, we realized that we hadn't specified the time zone in our emails of when our cart was going to close. And even though we were in the central time zone, there were people who were purchasing in Pacific time zone. Well, we were closing it at midnight, which meant that we could not close the cart until 2 a.m. So we had all been excited about staying till midnight. We'd ordered pizza. We had maybe a little whiskey on tap. You know, we were like having fun. Then we realized, oh crap, we have to stay up till 2 a.m. in case anybody calls in. We were exhausted. We were kind of overwhelmed. I will tell you what we started to do. We started dancing. We started actually dancing. I started teaching, the younger generation how to do the Cabbage Patch, and the Running Man, because they were doing the Running Man differently. New generations, they don't know. But we started videoing it, and we still laugh at those videos of me teaching the Cabbage Patch and the Running Man. And, we never would have gotten through that night without those moments where we were literally falling on the floor laughing because my friends Tim and Kyle couldn't do the Roger Rabbit. That could feel like a waste of time, but it wasn't. It actually restored time. It allowed us to make it through the night. Joy is not frivolous, it's fuel. Something else I've learned recently is that joy is a form of resistance. When the world feels heavy, joy is not denial, it's defiance. And I feel like in this day and age, in a world we live in, we need a little bit more joy as resistance. It's saying, I will not bow to things that are supposed to make me feel small. The things that I'm supposed to be ashamed about myself, I am actually going to celebrate. For centuries, people who've been marginalized by race or gender or sexuality or circumstance have turned to joy as a way to stay alive. For queer people, joy has always been a protest. Pride itself, it was never about arrogance. It was about finding joy in being who you are as a human. It's presence. It's about saying, I am still here. I am still worthy. I am still beautiful. You want me to shrink and hide away because I should feel shame about who I am. But I'm going to dance and I'm going to celebrate and I'm going to wear glitter to show you just how wrong you are. I love queer joy. For Black communities, joy has always been more than celebration. It's survival. Gospel choirs, laughter at the cookouts, dancing in the streets. These aren't distractions. They can be declarations. You can't take my humanity. And for women, joy is a rebellion against a culture that equates seriousness with worth and delight with danger. To laugh loudly, to delight openly, to take up emotional and physical space, these are radical acts. They shouldn't be, but so often they are. Joy says, I will not apologize for taking up my space. My laughter, my body, my voice, they are here too. Joy says, you can't have my spirit. Joy says, I will not live my life apologizing for being fully me. Researcher Ingrid Fattel-Lee writes about how joy can be a form of resistance. She says that joy gives us energy to keep showing up, especially when life feels heavy. In her work, she explains that celebration and delight aren't distractions from the hard stuff. They're how we stay connected, creative, and joy while we feel alive. Joy reminds us that we are more than what we produce, and in this case, more than what we endure. It's how we recover our humanity in the midst of challenge. When we let joy lead us, even in the midst of difficulty and sorrow, we are quietly declaring that our existence itself is holy and that no amount of shame or suffering will make us forget that. I remember a couple years ago, we were taking our kids to Pride here in Nashville. And as we were approaching the kind of main area where the festival was happening, we'd moved from the parade, we were walking down to kind of the festival. My husband stopped our family on the street, and we stopped in some shade because it was really hot there, and said to our kids, hey, when we get up there, there's probably going to be people that are yelling at us. And you need to know you don't need to be afraid of that. And I hadn't even thought about it. I had walked through protesters before, people who said very horrible things to me, but it didn't really affect me. I just kind of rolled off my back. But this was the first time I was taking my children through an environment where people were going to be yelling at them. And that can be really scary. Well, as we got closer, we walked through a line of people holding signs that were saying things very negative about who we were and how we were raising our children. And then we walked up towards the gate, and there was a person on a bullhorn. And this person started singling us out and first started talking to us personally and saying, you're an abomination. You're going to hell. You should wake up and stop being prideful and all these things. And that was kind of fine for a minute. And then he turned his wrath on our children. And he started saying, you are abusing your children with your lifestyle. You are pedophiles. And just started going in. And the fact that you are leading your children down a road to eternal damnation. Well, in that moment, my husband turned around and started to go after this guy. And I yelled at him, Jamie, get back here. And we turned around and we were both seething. And we walked into Pride after being yelled at by this protester. And I felt sick to my stomach. Part of me was like, I should have let him go talk to him. We should have stood up more, maybe all of this stuff. And it kind of ruined the next couple hours for us because we just kind of walked around in silence because we had just been shamed and yelled at by this man with a bullhorn. Well, later we dropped the kids off at home and we decided, you know what? We don't want this to ruin our experience. Let's go back and go to the concert that night. And so we came back to the festival and we walked by this man again who was yelling at us again, walked in and sat down kind of on the fringe of the show, the concert that was happening. And we talked through what had happened earlier in that day. And as we were sitting there, the crowd started getting bigger and bigger, and more people were waving rainbow flags and they were jumping up and down and they were dancing. And we just started to see the joy in the middle of this field in front of this huge stage. After a couple hours, there were literally thousands of people in this field jumping up and down. Well, we decided to join the festivities, and it was during a song that I don't remember the band's name, but they were singing the song, I don't care, I love it, I don't care. And I'm getting a little teary because in that moment, we started jumping up and down and celebrating and finding joy in the midst of what we had just experienced. And I realized in that moment that that joy that we were all experiencing was a form of resistance against the voices that were trying to tell us we were less than who we are. And it would have been easy, and often happens, where we shut down a little bit and go into grief and shame. But for me, that moment of jumping up and down with a couple thousand people in a field singing, I don't care, I love it, was one of the greatest moments of joy in my life. And we stayed even longer. And the next performer was Billy Porter. And there was this moment where he sang this song called Audacity, talking about how when he was younger, he felt like he had to be ashamed of who he was. But as he grew up, just being himself, it took audacity to live fully as himself. And I'm, again, standing in this crowd with a few thousand people who are raising their hands, almost in like worship of the moment, not of him, but of the joy that we could all experience in that moment, having the audacity to be joyful when people outside were yelling at us. Joy can be a form of resistance. It connects us. It allows us to stand up and say, I am here and I'm good. The last thing I want to share that I've been learning in all of this is joy demands practice. I think a lot of times we think of joy as being like circumstantial, like when things are good, I have joy. When things are bad, I don't. Or that it's just like, well, I need to find the joy. It exists outside of me. But the reality is joy doesn't usually show up in grand gestures. It hides in repetition, in attention, in small things done often. Psychologist Barbara Fredrickson calls this the broaden and build theory of positive emotion. When you experience joy in small doses, it broadens your awareness and builds emotional resilience over time. Meaning, joy is something we can practice. And Fredrickson's research also shows that when we experience joy regularly, it actually, again, strengthens our minds and bodies. It broadens our perspectives. It helps us recover faster from stress, and it deepens our relationship. In one study, people who practiced noticing and recording moments of joy for a month became more resilient and more satisfied with their lives. That tells me that joy isn't just a luxury, it's a skill that's worth developing. That's the work. That's the work, is to find and honor and mark those moments of joy, to notice, to practice, to build. So I want to challenge us practically as we close out this podcast to cultivate more joy. Here's some real practical things you can do. At the end of each day or each week, I want you to just pause and say, what gave me delight? Where was a moment of joy? When did I laugh from my gut? And then outside of yourself, who or what helped me feel most alive? So where did I find joy? Where did I laugh? And then who helped me or what helped me feel most alive? When we begin writing that down, we start noticing joy a little bit more. We start turning our eyes towards it. We become more aware of it. So what I want you to do when you pause for those moments, then I want you to acknowledge them. I want you to toast it. Give a little toast to joy. Mark it. Make it sacred. Joy is a sacred act, and it demands practice. I guess what I'm trying to say in all of this is the longer I study joy, the more I realize it isn't fragile. It's not rare. It's everywhere. It lives in the small things done with love, in laughter that breaks tension, in the quiet moments that remind us we're still here. It's not a prize for endurance in getting through the hard thing. It's the invitation to keep showing up. It's not something we earn by getting life right. It's something we practice so we can live it fully. Joy is what can make the ordinary feel holy. I think the thing that I've learned the most is joy is less a feeling to chase and more of a rhythm to keep. So let me leave you with this. May you let joy interrupt your plans. May you let joy be your teacher, your fuel, and your friend. May your joy be an act of quiet rebellion, a reminder that your spirit cannot be silenced. And may you never mistake joy for distraction, because joy is the work. Because we believe you can be both kind and ambitious, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a Badass Softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.